liquidity. At its peak, the yen carry trade was estimated by some banks to be in the trillions. It was like the global markets were running on Japanese Wi-Fi. But the problem was that the entire trade relied on one assumption that held everything together, that Japanese yields would stay near zero forever. But in 2024, that assumption broke when the Bank of Japan ended its yield curve control policy, and Japan raised interest rates for the first time in 17 years, and then they raised them again. And immediately following that second rate hike decision, the S&P 500 dropped 6%, and Japan's index, the Nikkei 225, plummeted over 12% in a single day, marking its worst drop since 1987. It was a clear signal that markets were officially spooked. Because when Japanese yields rise, two things happen. 1. Borrowing in yen becomes more expensive. And 2. Hedging currency risk becomes more expensive too. And suddenly, the free money trade isn't so free anymore. And that 4% US Treasury Bob was looking at doesn't look so good anymore. And this was the beginning of the end for the yen carry trade. Because now the math had flipped, and the trade was no longer a no-brainer. And when the math flips, the capital flows flip too. And the money that flowed out of Japan for decades was starting to return home. And this is what's called repatriation, and it's one of the biggest threats in global markets today. Because investors are starting to realize the uncomfortable truth. The cheapest source of global liquidity for the past 30 years is no longer cheap. But here's why it actually matters. Because for decades, Japan wasn't just some random buyer of US debt. They were one of the most consistent, price-insensitive buyers of long-term treasuries. And the yields on those long-term treasuries? Well, they aren't set by Jerome Powell. The Federal Reserve controls short-term rates. But the 10-year, 20-year, and 30-year? Well, those yields are largely determined by supply and demand. And the problem is, everyone's staring at the wrong lever. And here's legendary